Hello friends, and welcome back to another Blind Date with a Bake and Blind Date with a Book video. This is my monthly series where I go ahead and pick a random book that's been wrapped. I don't know what these books are. And I also pick a random bake from my favorite baker's, Melissa Forti's baking book, to get me back into baking. This is to help me find books that maybe I would have not read, or maybe that I bought a long time ago and keep putting off. So both of these are just ways to get me doing something that maybe I wouldn't have read or wouldn't have baked. That's the main part of these series. I love doing it. It's been a lot of fun and it's been really experimental. So you can remember what we chose last month. Let's go ahead and have a little rewind. So this is going to be deciding what we're going to be baking next. I'm going to open it up here. This is what we have. What are they? Ooh! Biscotti senza uva. Egg-free cookies. Ink. We're going to do this one. This is the tallest one of the two. So let's go ahead and see what we're going to be reading. Oh, Where'd You Go Bernadette? I got this book also when I was living in the US. And I think I started this book because there is, wait, hold on, where'd it go? A coupon for American Eagle for 10 euros off from 2013 to 2014. That is how long I've had this book. So I'm looking forward to reading this. I think it'll be a fast read too, even though it's kind of a thicker book. So as you saw, I was supposed to be reading Where'd You Go Bernadette by Maria Semple. And I was also supposed to be making these beautiful shortbread cookies that are egg-free. And these ones, Melissa Forti's explained, she made this recipe for her customers who are egg intolerant. I went ahead and baked this recipe. Yep, no eggs. And now I kind of want to talk about these two things. Before we get too far into the actual review, I want to go ahead and do a baking montage, show off the fun little recipe. It's really, really easy. And while we'll do our baking montage, I'm going to go ahead and read the back of the book so you can kind of know what the book is about. So let's go ahead and head into the kitchen and do a little baking montage. When 15-year-old B claims a family trip to Antarctica as a reward for her perfect grades, her fiercely intelligent but agoraphobic mother, Bernadette, throws herself into preparation for the trip. Worn down by years of trying to live the Seattle life she never wanted, Bernadette is on the brink of a meltdown. As disaster follows disaster, she disappears, leaving her family to pick up the pieces, which is exactly what B does. Weaving together emails, invoices, and school memos to reveal the secret past that Bernadette has been hiding for decades. Where'd You Go Bernadette is an ingenuously entertaining novel about a family coming to terms with who they are and the power of a daughter's love for her imperfect mother. This recipe, it didn't take very long, so I don't think I need to go into more details, read quotes, or anything like that. I think we can go ahead and just dive into the review of the recipe. Quick thought, I don't know if I should wait for my butter to cool completely before adding it to the flour mixture, or if it was right for me to add it directly from the stove. That's one question I do have. I'm not really sure. I think it was fine, but I did notice that the butter was kind of oozing out of the flour mixture, so I'm not sure if that was supposed to be it, but I do have to say that these are actually really delightful. I think the idea of melting the butter and adding it into the flour, you kind of get that lamination that you would get from making your croissant or anything like that. So it's almost like a really quick croissant dough, like a rough puff. And you get kind of the flakiness that you would get from a rough puff. It's kind of hard to see, I know, I'm sorry. But they're really delightful, really nice. It's not very sweet because you're not adding actually very much sugar. But I think one thing I would actually change with the recipe is I ended up adding the lemon zest directly in with all the other ingredients like the recipe calls for. But I probably would have rubbed the sugar and the zest together so that way you get a little bit more of that zest oil from the lemons coming through in the cookie. Because right now it's very, very mild. I would not eat these with coffee just because coffee and citrus things don't normally go well together, but these would be really, really perfect with a cup of tea. I think they're really nice. They have an interesting consistency because they don't have eggs. So you're getting more of kind of like almost like a cakey texture, which is really interesting, but it still has that crunch because I baked it for a little bit longer. I like them. I think they're really tasty. I think they're a great alternative to a sugar cookie that has eggs in it. And they're really delightful. I really like the lemon flavor. There's honestly not much to say about the cookie. They're easy to make. They're honestly very easy to make. I made these in like 20 minutes. It's just throw all the ingredients into a bowl, mix it together, cut out the cookies, bake them for 10-ish minutes, and then you have cookies. So also, if you're running short on time and you need some cookies at home, these are great little additions. So great recipe, very tasty, really fun to make. And now I have like little mushroom cookies. I thought the mushrooms were fitful. The mushrooms were fitting to fit into my fall decor. So I really like the mushrooms, but I also did your classic beautiful crimped round. So really fun cookie, really easy to make, really easy to eat. What more can you say about a delightful egg-free cookie? Honestly, you can't even tell that they're egg-free. Their texture is just a little bit different from a sugar cookie, but it doesn't bother me at all. Delightful, tasty, wonderful. I highly recommend. Again, Melissa Forti's baking book. I'm going to keep recommending it. That's why I'm baking out of it. Anyway, let's go ahead and get over to Where'd You Go Bernadette by Maria Semple. This book takes place in Seattle, my hometown, my home area. I'm not directly from Seattle. I'm actually from the peninsula side, so where you find Bremerton, Poulsbo, Bainbridge, Port Angeles, Port Townsend, the Olympic National Forest. I'm from that area actually, so I'm more on the other side, and then Seattle's where I went to college, and then I also worked and did my young adult life. That's what my connection to Seattle is. Funny enough, I only went to Seattle maybe 2 or 3 times between the ages of 5 and 16, 17. So I didn't go to Seattle actually very often, but when you want an office job, or when you're like, hey, I'm gonna move to the big city, Seattle was only 2 hours away, 2-ish hours away. It was the ferry that was the longest. So I know Seattle very well. I lived there for 8 years. I really loved Seattle in certain aspects. I lived up in Northgate. I also lived in the U District. If you know these areas, then woohoo, come join the fun. I didn't actually go to UW. I just lived in the U District because I loved the area. I loved the atmosphere. But I went to school somewhere else and just lived in that area. I moved quite a bit, so I lived in a few different areas, especially when I was in school. I was moving into different homes because each year was, a new year. I needed a new place. But Seattle was definitely a place where I really got to know. I still really love the city, and I still think of it as my home, even though I grew up on the peninsula side. So a little background on my Seattle life. I'm just mentioning this because this book takes place in Seattle, and I have quite a bit of opinion about what the book was talking about in Seattle and what they thought about of the Seattle area. I'm actually wearing my flannel today because I wanted to represent more of my view of Seattle. That's why I'm wearing a flannel, because when we are looking at Bernadette is actually from LA, and she went to Seattle to kind of start a new life. Also because her husband was working at Microsoft, he ended up getting moved over to Seattle, so it ended up making sense. All right, now you're probably wondering, Melissa, what is this book even about? I read you the synopsis, but you're kind of wondering, hey, what is going on? To give you a quick idea before we get too far, if you're new here, my name's Melissa, but if you're new here, what's important to know is this first part of the video is going to be non-spoiler. So I don't want to tell you any of the spoilers, so don't worry. I'm just going to give you some ideas so you can figure out if this is going to be a book that you want to read and pick up. After that, I'll warn you before I go into spoilers. So then I'll talk about all of my thoughts, my deep introspective feelings, but really I'll just go in and talk everything I thought about the book and my opinions, and then my thoughts and my feelings and so on. After that, I'll pick out my new book and my new bake. I only have 2 books left, which is quite fascinating and scary because the year's almost over. That's what this means. So I will go ahead and pick up a new bake and a new book at the end of the video. So if you want to see what that looks like, I'll go ahead and put chapters below so you can jump to the end when you're done watching the non-spoiler section so you can see what book and bake we're going to be reading for next week or next month for November. Okay. So So Where'd You Go Bernadette is about a youngish woman. She's in her 40s, youngish. And she has a young daughter named Bee. She ended up giving her daughter a lot longer name. I can't remember it because we end up calling her Bee through most of the book. And Bee is a 15-year-old girl who is really intelligent, really innovative, really just kind of a go-getter. And she has her two parents, Bernadette, who's a little bit of a hermit, and she has a hard time socializing. She doesn't like the parents of the students that go to Bee's school. She ends up spending a lot of time alone. She doesn't have a lot of friends. Actually, I don't think she has any friends. She has a really big rundown house, and she just is happy kind of being on her own all the time. That's kind of who Bernadette is. She's an anxious, overwhelmed person. And then her husband is a Microsoft genius. He has been building out a new kind of tool, or I don't really know how to explain his system, but the idea is that I believe, I didn't really pay attention to this part because it wasn't in a very big section of the book. It was just kind of like in passing, but he's building this machine that can read, or, I remember. He's building this machine to help people do things around home by using brain waves. So for example, if you're paraplegic and can't move, then you have this tool that can go ahead and connect to a system so that way you can do a few things at home. That's the idea behind it. He's developing this, and Microsoft went ahead and brought him in to be able to continue developing it. This is not a spoiler, it's just kind of a tool that he's building. It's a very small piece of the story. So he works for Microsoft, and he's a big guy. He's in the sense that he has hundreds of employees underneath him. He's working on a really large project. He's working long hours, and he is just really focused on his work. So you have Bee, who is an intelligent young girl. You have the mother, who's a hermit, and then you have the father, who is a big genius man who works for a large corporate company. That's our main characters. Those are the three people we're kind of following around in this book. We end up learning that Bee is not taking care of her mother, but she's very there for her mother. Like, her and her mother are best friends. They spend a lot of time together, and they're very cute. But we also learn that Bernadette and her husband are extremely wealthy, like extremely, extremely wealthy. We learn at the very beginning of the book that Bernadette actually goes up to Seattle, finds a house that is not like your cookie cutter house, and she ends up buying this house that is run down, falling apart because it's an old girls' school? Yeah, old girls' school. And it's pretty much condemned, but she really wants to buy this house because she's actually a very, very well-known architect. She is known for her 20-mile house, and this is a very big part of the story, so I don't want to give away too much of it, but she ends up being so popular and well-known for this 20-mile house, and her husband is also extremely, well off. He works at Microsoft, and he's one of the, leader project people there. So you know that these people are wealthy. So they ended up buying a big house in the Seattle area, and that is kind of the main where our most of our book takes place, is in this house for at least the first half. And Bernadette has a lot of ideas for the house. Bee is kind of living in la la land of everything is okay. She's just busy. She's playing her music and all this other stuff. And her husband is really focused on his work. And when Bee comes home and she has straight A's, we learn that she actually wants to go off to a boarding school? Yeah, a boarding school because her parents went to boarding school. And she thinks this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for her. But before she goes, because she got perfect grades, she now wants to go to Antarctica. And she wants to go on a cruise with her parents. Makes sense. Well, we end up finding out that Bernadette, of course, she is anxious and a bit frantic. She has a lot of anxiety about this trip. So she ends up hiring an online assistant to be able to help her book everything, find everything she's going to need, and end up kind of helping her make sure that this trip is as perfect as possible for Bee. And that's when things kind of start falling apart. That's the main idea about this book. So this book is just following these three characters. We of course have side characters that come in and out, But we're following these three characters on this adventure, and at one point Bernadette gets so anxious that she ends up having to leave, or she just, not having to leave, but she just disappears. Nobody can find her. And that's what story we're following. The story itself is written in a very interesting way because it's not written as if it's a narrator telling us everything. B comes in every once in a while to talk a little bit about her thoughts, but the book is actually set up where we actually are following the days, and these are letters, or these are emails, these are transcripts. So it's a mix of different forms of writing, and this is B's collection of pieces that she's been able to find to be able to figure out where Bernadette is. So these are everything that's happening before her mom disappears up into the point where she disappears. And she's trying to put all these pieces together, and she decides to put it together like this. So this is her investigation, and we're actually reading her investigation in short letter form. And it's really fascinating. I actually really liked the writing style in the sense of how it was put together. I found that really good. And I think it was a great way to kind of tell different perspectives without having us jump around a lot between different characters. Of course, we get letters from different people, but you still feel like you're following the story really well. I think it was actually put together really well in the sense of what came next and how everything was organized. A few of the things that I didn't like are the characters. Honestly, I'm somebody who loves a book that's character driven, and I've mentioned that multiple times. If a book doesn't have at least one character that I'm like, ooh, I like that character, then a book can be really difficult for me to read. And unfortunately, in this book, the characters are written for you to be frustrated with them. So you end up being, at least for me, I end up being frustrated with the characters most of the time. I end up putting a lot of tabs in the story because the characters did something and I was like, oh, frustration. But that's my own personal opinion. That's how I just like reading books. I like books that are going to have at least one character in there that I can root for and feel good about. And this book is written so that way where you don't want to root for them, which is really fascinating. And I still liked it. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't one of my favorite books. I think it's definitely a book for quite a few people. I think one of the reasons I also didn't like it is because of how Seattle was portrayed. We have a character, Bernadette, who is in love with LA, and she just massively hates Seattle. She has so many negative things to say about Seattle, and there were descriptions in here about Seattle that actually frustrated me. But then I was reading a comment earlier, and it was like, this book is about the one percenters in Seattle. And I was like, oh, I'm not the one percenter. And you can imagine, I'm not a one percenter, and that's perfectly fine. I don't want to be in that area, but it's about extremely rich people in Seattle and their hardships. And I'm thinking, if I went through anything that any of these characters went through, it would have turned out completely different. And that's one of the reasons where I'm wearing my flannel, is because Seattle, through her eyes, Bernadette's eyes, is just a disgusting place where nobody should go, and it's just a waste of space, pretty much. And for me, Seattle is woods, mountains, water, ocean, exploration. And so that's why I like my flannels, is because this represents Seattle for me. This represents the Pacific Northwest for me. Because to me, it's going out fishing, it's going out into the woods, it's wandering, it's exploring new things. It's not about city life necessarily. Seattle, yeah, is a large city. It has Amazon, Microsoft, Google, all these large companies, but it's not something that I think, oh, this is Seattle. Seattle is about a mixed pot of all these different cultures, all these different people coming together and exploring something new together. It's about love and showing love for people. And that's what Seattle was to me when I was living there. I know it's changed a lot in the last couple of years, but for me, Seattle will always be a place where I was welcome, that I could talk to people on the train or the bus. Now there's a train, but normally I was riding the bus. I could go down to Pike Place Market and I could get my fish, or I could talk to the ladies who were working behind the vegetable stands, or the guys that were working behind the vegetable stands, and ask, hey, I'm making a stew. Can you recommend some vegetables for me? Or go to the meat stands and ask for recommendations for the meats. I could get my fish there. I could do so many different things in Pike Place Market, and there's delicious restaurants, there's delicious things, there's beautiful views, and the weather, yeah, it's sprinkling most of the time, but you can also feel the beautiful breeze off the ocean. So Seattle to me is not what Bernadette explained, and I think that's one of the reasons why I may have not gotten along with her as much as I wanted to, is because she was talking negatively about my home and what I consider my home. And she missed out on so much of the beautifulness of the Pacific Northwest. And for her to be like, oh, there's not much up here, I'm getting on a rant. The biggest idea is that I think one of the things is that Bernadette was a character that I wasn't able to connect with, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't like the book as much. But I do think this book is for some people because I think it's really creatively written. I think it's a great idea of how it's written. I love the letters putting together. It kind of reminds me of how Dracula's put together, but we also have the idea of like these characters weaving together this mess of a situation, and it's still fascinating. It's still well written. And yeah, I don't think it's not worth reading. It's just, again, like I said, the characters just weren't for me. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts. Yeah, that's all I have to say about non-spoiler thoughts. I'm going to jump into spoilers. So if you do not want to hear the spoilers, make sure you jump down to the section below where you can see the chapters, and I'll go ahead and mark where you can jump to the end to see which book and book we're going to be doing next for November. But if you want to listen to spoilers, you can listen in 3, 2, 1 spoiler time. So, Where'd You Go Bernadette? I am not going to re-explain what I just talked about, so don't worry. So if you skipped to this section and you didn't listen to the non-spoiler section, yeah, I mean, if you've read the book, you've read the book. If you haven't and you just want to listen to the spoiler section, hello. And I'm going to spoil a lot in this book. Where'd You Go Bernadette is definitely one of those stories that I had a hard time connecting with. I didn't connect with Bernadette at all in the sense of how she felt about Seattle. I did connect to Bernadette in the sense of how she felt in general, like the idea of anxiety, having a hard time connecting to people, feeling social anxiety when you're surrounded by people, not wanting to talk to people when you're kind of in a forced situation where you have to talk to people, having anxiety about getting seasick, having anxiety about going to do stuff. I have anxiety, so I know how that feels. I have also social anxieties, so if I'm in a big crowd, I actually really struggle with those things. But I have also been really trying to work on that. I try to do a lot of things that get me out of my bubble and out of my shell. But I do understand that those things are really hard and it's not always easy. So I get it. It's rough, and I can feel for Bernadette in those situations. What I can't feel for Bernadette is the things she decides to do and the way she does them and the way she does them. So we follow a collection of emails, letters, things that have been put together that end up kind of explaining who Bernadette is, where she ends up going, what she ends up doing, and so on and so forth. We end up getting a lot of emails between Bernadette and somebody that she's hired in India to act as her assistant. So Bernadette says, hey, can you go ahead and collect clothing that we need for Antarctica? I need this, I need that, blah, 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 and blah. So we end up getting a lot of that. At one point she asks for a fishing vest, and I think this is actually a good idea. I remember having a fishing vest when I was younger. You could put a lot of things in the fishing vest. It was great. But there's one thing about the fishing vest I'll mention later. But so she ends up getting a lot of clothing for her husband, and B. That way they can get prepared for their Antarctica trip. And when they're on their collection of items, B is finishing up her classes and her husband is working a ton. And I can never remember her husband's name. It's just like a name that's not sticking in my head. I'm just gonna Elgie, E-L-G-I-E. I have no idea how you pronounce that. Elgie, the father. So The father is a workaholic. He is at the Microsoft all the time. He's working all the time, and he is just obsessed with his work. You kind of understand because he is frustrated with Bernadette, and Bernadette is not doing very much, but we end up finding out that Bernadette had a big kind of breakdown before moving to Seattle. She was building a house down in LA, which is called the 20 Mile House. She used materials in a 20 mile radius to build a house of reusable stuff, recycled stuff, and so on and so forth. She ends up getting in an argument or kind of like a neighborly battle with her new neighbor who's moving in. He's buying all stuff new. She ends up stealing stuff from him. Not stealing, kind of. He throws things out, she takes the garbage. And she's using that to continue building onto her house. They end up having a feud. Her husband, Bernadette's husband, ends up getting an offer for a job in Seattle. So they're like, okay, this is a good start. Bernadette, although, wins an architect award, and they're going to come take pictures, but she wants to sell the house, so she ends up selling the house. And who they end up selling the house to is actually working for the neighbor that she was having a feud for. So when she comes back to take pictures, that neighbor's already tearing down the house. It's kind of confusing. I'm kind of confused by it as well, because in the sense of like, I'm trying to figure out how quick could you tear down a house? And yeah, I don't know. It was very weird. It was a very weird section. And I think that that's probably one of the parts where I'm like, I'm questioning this a little bit, but it's not terrible. So Bernadette ends up having a slight breakdown though, because she's been working on this house for years, and she ends up, when she moves to Seattle, she buys a rundown old girls' school, and we think that she's going to start building it up, but it doesn't end up happening. And so B, her, and her husband are all living in this condemned house. For most of the book, I thought B was like 11 years old. I find out that she's 15 at the very end of the book, which is then very confusing because I thought B, like the way B reacts sometimes, I'm like, okay, this is an 11-year-old girl. When I think of her as 15, it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, it's fine. So we have Bernadette having kind of like a breakdown. She's having a hard time kind of moving forward with her life. And we end up also finding out that when Bernadette and her husband moved up to Seattle, they lost a few of their pregnancies, and B ended up being kind of the lucky last one. So B ended up surviving, but she ended up having a lot of issues with her heart when she was born. So she had a lot of surgeries up until about 4 years old, and then now she's healthy and good to go. But you can imagine Bernadette and her husband had a lot of stress, a lot of worries, and of course they're going to love B to the utmost of anything. They've really tried for this child, and this child survived, and now they're showing this child as much love and care. B is also a very intelligent child. She likes music, she likes helping people, she does really well in school, and she wants to go to boarding school because her parents went, and she thinks it's going to be a cool opportunity. Okay, so we have some ideas. This is kind of like the information dump. Where I start getting frustrated. Bernadette had a breakdown, and her husband, instead of like trying to take care of her, and we don't really hear much about like what was happened here. We do know Bernadette doesn't believe in therapy, but the fact is that their relationship is very broken, and you can see it, and they're not doing anything to fix it. And that's one of the things that frustrates me. I hate lack of communications in books. I hate when this is portrayed in movies and books and any other media. How often do you not talk to people? And I understand I get anxiety when there's difficult situations, but when your partner has a complete breakdown and is not doing well, why would you not be like, hey, my job is my job, but my life is way more important? Why wouldn't you take the time to take care of your person? Like, why wouldn't you take the time to take care of your partner and help your partner and try to help them figure out what's going on? Like, why is he not doing anything? And he has like a bunch of lines of things that he thinks. I've marked these because the way he does things actually frustrated me so much. So at one point, B does really well, and They are celebrating, I think, her grades. No, they're celebrating, I think they're celebrating actually going to Antarctica. I think they've already like planned everything. And the Bee and her mom, Bernadette, end up going to the Microsoft office to have a mini celebration with her dad. And he says, I wish this was more of a celebration, but I have a video conference. It's like, dude, if you want to have this as a celebration, then take the time to make a celebration. Like, if you need to schedule time in for your family, then do it. I work in an office. I schedule my lunch breaks to make sure I actually get my lunch breaks in. We can do that. That's perfectly fine. And if you're a boss, I understand you have a lot going on, but I work with managers. I know how busy they are. I know that they have a lot going on, but your family is number one. I don't care how important your job is. Your family and your personal life always should come first. Personal opinion, but the fact that her husband is valuing his work more than his child's life and his wife's life is one of the most frustrating parts for me in this story. And then we have like another part where he's like, I did a lot of marking of where he just frustrated me. I worked even longer hours and called it a partnership. Bernadette would call the shots, I'd pay for them. So they were more in like a partnership in most of things. So I get it. Michel is my partner. I call him my partner before I call him anything else. We've been engaged for 2 years and I still most often call him partner. And for me, that means like he's my life partner. But in this context, the husband is saying it as more of like a business partner. And I think that's just kind of gross. Like, I don't know. It feels too transactional for me. And so the more we get his interactions and the more we get his thoughts, the more it just frustrates me. And before we get to like the main part of what really frustrated me with him, I just want to talk about a couple other things. I have a couple tabs in here to kind of remind me of things I wanted to talk about. And one of them is kind of the depiction of Seattle. And I find it really interesting because I think Maria Semple is actually from Seattle. And there's some things that she's talking about. And I'm thinking to myself, would that really be something? For example, so we've put a pin into the father note. I just want to have a little rant of Seattle for a second. She's talking about Seattle in different ways. And at one point she's talking about like parking down in downtown Seattle. And parking in downtown Seattle is completely stupid. I recommend taking a train or a bus in downtown Seattle. It's just easier. And if you really have to, get a taxi. Don't drive. But she's talking about Pike Place Market at some point and how Bee is running through Pike Place Market getting all of their things. And I don't know if you've ever been in Pike Place Market, but it is full. It is crammed with people, especially like when the cruise ships come in, completely madhouse. Even when the cruise ships are not there, you have people who are visiting who are going to Pike Place Market, people who are like me who lived in Seattle, but we got most of our produce from the Pike Place Market because it was the best produce. You also got your fish. You got like a lot of things from Pike Place Market. A little bit more expensive, but extremely good quality. And they're just like wandering in Pike Place Market like it's nothing. And I'm like, you can't just wander in Pike Place Market. You kind of like, if you do, you're gonna just get lost in the sense of like all the commotion. And if you're on a mission, that mission is so hard to complete. So there were some things that she mentioned. She also talked about like waiting for the ferry to go to Bainbridge. Yeah, there was just a couple things that were coming up where I'm like, that's an interesting way to think about Seattle. It's not a bad thing. But because Bernadette doesn't like Seattle, you get a lot of the negative stuff about Seattle. But honestly, there's a lot of really wonderful things about Seattle. Go on some hikes. Go to the peninsula. Go visit the woods. Okay. Let's go back to Bernadette and her husband. So Bernadette and her husband have a very strained and awkward relationship. At one point, Bernadette is looking at trying to figure out how to get some seasickness medication because they're going on a cruise ship, they're going to the Antarctica. They're on a boat. You're going to get seasick. I get seasick all the time. I take Dramamine for my seasickness, and it works fantastic. But Bernadette doesn't trust Dramamine, so she's trying to get something that's way more intense. And while she's waiting in the pharmacy, she ends up falling asleep because she has a bad habit of not being able to sleep. So sometimes when she's sitting somewhere, she just falls asleep. Her husband walks by And instead of worrying about her in that moment, he like gets mad at her. And if I were to fall asleep in a pharmacy and Michael were to walk by and see me asleep in a pharmacy, I think his first reaction would be like, oh my goodness, Melissa, are you okay? Let me get you home. Let me help take care of you. I would do the same thing for Michael. I would do the same thing for most of my friends. All of my friends, not most of them. But we then have him getting mad at Bernadette, being like, how could you do this? Why could you fall asleep here? Go home. And I have to go back to work, blah, blah, blah. You're embarrassing me. And I'm thinking to myself, who has to be so self-centered that he can't understand that, hey, Bernadette, there's something wrong with Bernadette. And that's, I mean, the main idea of this book. There's something wrong with Bernadette. So we follow the story between her and her husband, and that's one of the big things. Bee's kind of in the background. She's the one that's putting together all of the information, though, or kind of. Then the breaking point is at one point, Bernadette realizes that she doesn't know if she can go to Antarctica because of her anxiety and her stress and everything like that. So she plans to go get her wisdom teeth taken out so that way she can't go on a trip. She ends up deciding not to do that, and when she comes home, her husband, a therapist, and the FBI are all there. What ends up happening is that Bernadette was messaging or having an online assistant who's from India. Well, it turns out that person is actually not from India, and they're actually in Moscow, and it's a identity theft ring. And Bernadette has given them their social security numbers, their bank account numbers, everything. And we find out that the online assistant had just asked for, what is it called? Attorney for life. The where you have kind of control over if they live or die if something ends up happening to you. I forgot what it's called. So we end up finding out that Bernadette has been giving all of her information to this person that's actually in Moscow, Russia, and who's trying to steal their identity. And like I said, they have a ton of money, so of course it's worth it. I'm not saying to do that. Don't do that. So we end up kind of seeing the FBI agents reacting to that. We have an intervention going on because her husband's like, you need help. And instead of like actually talking to Bernadette and being like, hey, you need help, he ends up pretty much saying, you're screwed up and this is all your fault, which makes Bernadette upset, which is understandable. And the first part of this is actually a collection of all the notes that the FBI put together. So this isn't what B put together. This is what the FBI put together, and B ended up getting a hold of it later on in the story. And Bernadette ends up being like, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. She's crying, of course. She goes to the bathroom and then she disappears. She's gone for weeks with no interaction. And of course, the husband, it's a great old husband there, has a weak moment and ends up sleeping with his secretary. His secretary is just all weird on another situation. Like, we have this communication between the neighbor of Bernadette. She's having another feud with another neighbor. It's a whole thing. And that neighbor is just messed up as well. And then that neighbor has a best friend who's the assistant to Bernadette's husband, who's also weird and messed up and confusing and a terrible character. So we have a bunch of terrible characters. They're just all terrible characters. And we end up following... So Bernadette disappears, and we end up finding out that Bernadette's husband has now slept with his assistant, and now the assistant is pregnant. But... we get a couple letters or emails from the assistant's perspective, and they're very, very weird. Like, they're obsessive almost. They're like in La La Land, and they're like, oh, we're going to be together forever. We have the most perfect family. Oh, I went down to go see if we can find Bernadette together because we have an email. We saw that her card was charged. She was actually on the cruise ship to Antarctica. And we get like little pieces and parts of like the assistant's perspective. And at one point she's like, Bernadette's going to ruin it all. It's not good. It's all terrible. I hate Bernadette. Bernadette is going to take her husband back. And it's almost like this woman is completely crazy, that she's doing something so terrible, and it's both the husband and the assistant's fault. It's disgusting. It's frustrating, and we end up finding out that she kind of like realizes that this is all stupid and crazy, and that she is messed up, and that she needs to realize that Bernadette's husband's not actually going to leave his family for her. It was just a one night stand, which is just gross on its own. It's a whole messed up part. So we we find out that the neighbor that didn't like Bernadette actually comes back and helps Bernadette escape the house when the FBI and the investigators and the husband and the therapist were there in the intervention. So she actually ends up coming to help Bernadette escape because she feels bad for Bernadette, because she's also helped kind of screw up Bernadette's life. She ends up kind of getting Bernadette back to the house. She shares all of the FBI information because the assistant sent the FBI information also to the neighbor because they're best friends. And Bernadette's like, I gotta go. So she ends up actually leaving, and we're trying to figure out where Bernadette is. And that's like the last part of this story is, where did Bernadette go? So that's the last like quarter of the story, or like 1/5-ish. And we are with B. B is just going off the deep end. She's just crazy in the sense of like, she's deciding not to work hard in school. She's deciding to be mad at her dad, which is understandable. And the relationship between them is really strained and really terrible. The dad is saying, hey, we shouldn't care. But the Bernard or B ends up saying, hey, for me to get closure, I need to go on the trip to Antarctica. We know that B is just saying that so that way she can go on the search for her mom. And during that trip, they end up having a heart-to-heart at some point, and they're like friends again, or parent and child, I guess. And what ends up happening after that? B does something and it triggers a thought in the dad's brain, and then they realize that, hey, Bernadette actually might be on a little tiny working station in Antarctica. And they do this whole thing and they do this whole scheme, and they end up getting into the building where Bernadette is. So B ends up getting there, and they find Bernadette, and they're like, oh my goodness. And Bernadette's like, why didn't you write me, B? And B's like, what do you mean? She's like, I sent you a letter. And B's like, I've never received your letter. And it's a whole thing. First of all, why would you send only one letter? Letters take forever to send. I like sending letters. I send letters from here in Germany all the way to the US. It could take 1 to 4 weeks for a letter to get there. It just depends on what happens. The letters are not dependable. So why would you send only one letter? And she's deciding that she doesn't want to send emails because of the whole investigation thing, and now she feels like she's going to mess up and email somebody that she shouldn't email. But it's like, oh my gosh, why would you just send one letter? Why would you not call? Why would you not try to send an email and just not be dumb about your email? Like, so she's thought that B has known that she's in Antarctica the entire time, but really B thought she could have been dead. B didn't really believe that, but everybody else believed she could be dead because they thought she got drunk and fell off the boat. But really, Bernadette's just been in this company in Antarctica, and she's now building the North Pole news station. North Pole? Antarctica station. She's now building the new station in Antarctica. And it like the ending just feels so just ugh. Like I ended up getting frustrated because there's no communication, and that's a big no-no for me. And then you have everything just kind of working out. And I wanted to bring up the fishing vest. The fishing vest ended up being such a big thing for like parts of the story. And we end up finding out that she's been putting her passport in her pocket all the time. And in her fishing vest, and at the very end, she doesn't have a passport because she left it on the cruise ship. Why was this a big thing through the entire story? And we end up finding out that Bernadette decides that she wants to stay in Antarctica to help build the station because it's like something that's going to help her. But whatever happened to like her promising that she would never build anything? I forgot to mention that. When B was in the hospital after she was born, Bernadette promised some god or something that she would stop kind of living her other wishes or things to make sure B lives. First of all, don't don't give up your life for your child. Like, your child should be a part of your life. You shouldn't just become a freaking a husk of a person when your child is there. You've now added something else into your life to continue growing your life. Your life is still important after you have children. And I understand she was making a promise to something bigger than what she is, but still, like, she needed help. So to be honest, I got so frustrated by the end of the story, because we have Bernadette just doing what she just wanted to do in the end, but then she doesn't communicate with her daughter at all, and she doesn't communicate with her husband at all, and her husband no longer has a job because Samantha too no longer is going to be a thing, and so now he's not working at all. So what does that mean for their relationship? What does that mean for their life? What does that mean in general? B decides not going to boarding school because it's not for her, because she doesn't live the rich life. She lives like a normal everyday life. But the school that she goes to is also second, like they call it like a second level school or something like that. It's not like boarding schools. It's the one below boarding schools. She doesn't go to a public school. I went to a public school and it was just, we're following these like rich people having rich people problems. Like, I don't know. It was just really weird. And I think I'm curious as to watching the movie, actually. I kind of want to watch the movie and see what the movie is all about. But the thing I had the hardest time with is the characters. I just felt like all of this could have been solved with a little bit of communication. Like, if Bernadette and her husband would have just been talking and not just been like partners in like a business type of scheme, then this could have been solved. And if Bernadette would have just gotten help, like, therapy is a great thing. I totally recommend therapy. I think it's a great thing for people to do. And I understand it. Like, she was like, oh, I don't do that. But it's like, come on. So I don't know. I'm not going to read this book again. I'm not going to put it on my shelf. I don't dislike it. It was more, I think the storyline was really interestingly put together. But yeah, it's a book. That's all I can say about it. It's a book. Yeah. Okay, those are all my thoughts about Where'd You Go, Bernadette? Bernadette went to Antarctica to work on an Antarctica like scientist house. Also, how they were talking about how scientists have to like work really hard to get onto this like little Antarctica scientisty thing in Antarctica, and they just agree that she can stay. Like, I don't know. It was too. Ugh. So, those are my thoughts. Those are my feelings. And I'm ready to move on. So, now the big question. What's our next bake and what's our next book? Let's go ahead and do the bake first. I'm worried I go like too far into the back and too far into the front sometimes, but then I always pick the middle ones too. I don't have a rhyme or reason for things. Okay, this. Ooh, we're getting a lot of little cookies. These are called Ovis Mollus cookies. These are probably among the best cookies in the world. Ooh, that's a big promise. Or at least they are to me. Okay. They come from the north of Italy. The name literally means soft egg. Their tender texture is achieved by using hard-boiled egg yolks. Interesting. As well as potato flour. Plain vanilla cookies. They are a hit in my tea room and can also be prepared as thumbprint cookies with jam. I like them plain as I believe beauty and flavor hide in simple things. Ooh, I'm really curious as to how the hard-boiled egg situation is going to work with these. They look really tasty. They look really cute. And I have another cookie, which is really interesting. This book is full of cakes. And I'm getting really lucky with these cookies, but sometimes a cookie is really nice to be able to make because they're very simple and easy. All right, now for our book. We got 2 left. I'm going to go with this one because my brain just says this one. wow, this is going to be perfect. Terry Pratchett, The Color of Magic. This is one of the first storylines, or first books of one of the storylines in the Discworld world. And I've read the wee little men, the free wee men, something like that. And then I've also read Mort, so this is going to be another first one for me. Let me read the little synopsis for you. Imagine, if you will, a flat world sitting on the backs of 4 elephants who hurtle through space balanced on a giant turtle. In truth, the Discworld is not so different from our own, yet at the same time very different, but not so much. I think this is going to be fun. I'm excited for this. So we have Terry Pratchett, The Color of Magic, some delicious cookies. That's what we got. Thank you so much for joining me for this wonderful rant. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you guys subscribe if you guys want to continue watching this series. I have another 9 videos that you could catch up on if you wanted to. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you have a fantastic day, a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you guys soon in another video. Until then, ciao!